So no, like I said, it was a privilege and an honor in 2013 to be able to meet you and just watch the amazing things. We were together in Nairobi at the Tunza. There you are.
Hey,
We were at Tunza together, and we it just you blow me away with the things that you do, and I can't be more inspired by the impact that you've had, and you know you've very much I'm sure heard that around the world, but I've got to say it because it's crazy cool the things that you've done and how you've made an amazing impact, inspiring so many people. So when I talk
the,
about
the, the short answer to that, Paul, is that I don't get that often. So thank you very much. It's really, really appreciated.
Dude, how freaking cool was it when we were sitting in Kenya that you got 192 kids from around the world just freaking cheering you on and just being inspired and you know the movement that you've had with inspiring people to have their own Feed 5,000 events. I mean, come on. I mean, that's just crazy cool, right?
It's pretty cool. And actually, there's a really exciting development from our side with respect to the USA, and that is that we got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to work in the USA in 2016. For us, it's a pretty sizable one, and we will be kicking off big time in the US this year, we hope, with the help of a whole range of partners and friends who want to put on Feeding the 5,000 coalitions and campaigns, or any number of different things that we like to instigate, and very, very much hope to come to Illinois. So
Hey, you've got not only a standing invitation. I want to invite you not only to my house to our community, but I've got a bunch of ninja eco warriors here who are ready
yeah,
to get behind you and
so we need that army very, very much, Paul. That's really, really cool. So yeah. I mean, I think the University of Illinois is already doing some pretty leading work
they
globally
are.
on the issue. So there's a really nice tie in there. And I think I'm right in saying that the Rockefeller Foundation has been in some way involved with the university in the past.
Oh
So,
yeah, I'm sure they have. So I work with the University of Illinois. I'm a director of their Celebrating High School Innovators program, and so I work directly with them on a number of endeavors. And like I said, I am more than they've done a great job with a lot of the things that they've been doing, and I can see that happening quite readily. So
right.
and again, I'd love to. I'd love to help you out and be on the ground floor. And like I said, we'd love to have you at our school, and I would love to make that happen. So I don't want to take away from what the kids want to do. They're excited to talk to you just as much as I am. So what I want to do is this is 20 questions with Tristram Stuart. What we'll go through here is probably each kid will ask a couple questions. They're questions that they're excited about. Pretty straightforward. You'll get to meet each one of them, and they'll go through, and we'll cycle through. And then what we'll do is we'll come back to me, and we'll close it all up. And you'll hear a series of bells and pledges of allegiance to the United States and things like that, which we'll break away just for a minute, just because we're before school here. These guys came in before school just so they could get a little extra time for you. So, very cool. Anyhow, it's a privilege. It's an honor. I'm glad to meet you again, and I look forward to spending some more time at some point down the line. So,
Thank you.
who wants to go first? I've got Stephen on first. You want to go first, Stephen? Steven's on his way. He got hurt in a basketball game, so he doesn't move as fast as he should, but I don't think it'll slow him down with his questions at all. So, and each of you guys,
What a joke.
here he comes. So, I'll have them go ahead and introduce the next person as they go. Thanks, Tristan.
Thank you, Paul.
Hi, Tristram. I'm Steve. First, I just want to say it's awesome things that you're doing around the world. Food waste is a big problem, and not a lot of people are attacking it like you are.
Thank you very much.
So, when we're doing a lot of research into what exactly it is that you're doing and how you're attacking this problem, and we noticed that there was a lot of interest in the farming and how they are not only producing the most that they can without wasting any, but also when they're feeding their livestock, how they can waste the least amount of food. And so when you look at farmers, what do you think they can still continue to work on when
Stephen,
trying to
explain
attack this problem?
That we live in an agricultural community.
Yeah, so when people say Illinois, they look a lot at Chicago. Well, Chicago is the entire state. That's not exactly true. Central Illinois has some of the best agriculture in the whole country, and so this is a big problem close to home for us.
Well, I think that one of the big problems that we've uncovered at the farm level is that whilst pretty much every farmer I've ever met hates the idea of wasting food. These are people that spend their entire year growing food. They're connected with the land, they're connected with the resources and the money and the labor, and indeed the love that they put into growing food. And then to see any of it go to waste is not just an economic problem for them, it's something that really goes to the heart of everything they do. They're in the job to feed people. And
Mr. Prawn, you have a call parked on 101.
Keep going. Sorry.
Seeing food waste is for them an existential thing as well as just a financial thing. But very often we find that farmers are nevertheless forced to waste food as a result of the buying practices of some of the companies that they sell their food to. So the real classic and big example of this, and no doubt you've seen some of our work on this area, is in the area of fruit and vegetables. Now, that may not be Illinois' principal food production, but in the area of fruit and vegetables, when farmers are supplying, in particular the retailers, they have to contend with very, very strict cosmetic standards that says exactly what any piece of fruit or vegetable has to look like. And of course, with the best will in the world, they're growing stuff out in the open, natural environment, and you can't guarantee that every fruit and vegetable is going to look a certain way, no matter how hard you try. And so quite frequently, growers are wasting 10, 20, even 50, and sometimes even 100% of their crops just because it doesn't look right. It's perfectly good, tastes good, nutritious, could easily be eaten, but they're not able to sell it because the retailers say this doesn't look perfect. And that's such an obviously wrong thing to do. And for that reason, we selected it as one of our principal messages that retailers have a responsibility there to work with their farmers. And in my view, to take responsibility for the food that is being grown for them and to ensure that anything that is fit for consumption does in some way meet the market for human consumption. You mentioned livestock, and of course, livestock is a massive part of our agricultural system. Unfortunately, the massive demand for an increased meat and dairy consumption globally, and particularly in rich countries like the US and across Europe, means that we're now using a lot of food that could be fed to people to feed to livestock. And what we propose in that respect is, wherever possible, to replace virgin crops like maize and soy with the wastes and byproducts of our food system. So that includes anything from catering establishments, manufacturers, and of course residues on farm, and use that to feed our livestock rather than extending the amount of land that we need to grow crops to feed them with virgin crops. That is the overall kind of picture with regard to waste on farms that we focus on anyway.
So now that we look at farms and farmers, what's the biggest thing that the everyday just person can do to help food waste?
Well, this is the problem, is that most consumers these days are very, very distant from the farms that are growing their food. They're geographically distant. Most of us now live in cities. and they're psychologically disconnected. It's so difficult to go into a grocery store, supermarket these days and really bring to mind all of the farms, the farmers, and the resources that have gone into producing this incredible cornucopian abundance that we all are experiencing every day when we go into the stores. And I think a lot of my work is about trying to close that gap and trying to remind people that, you know, they go in and they see a whole shelf of bananas and every banana looks the same. Try to imagine that pile of bananas that got wasted because it didn't look like the rest of those bananas. And once you've made that connection, it's pretty much, I think, a common sense thing to say this is not right. It's not a right use of resources. And if that's really what you feel, then I think we all have the power, and therefore I think we all have the responsibility to demand that the companies we give our money to every day comply with our values. At the moment, I am pretty sure that people are paying for things that they don't even agree with. And the very least we can do, therefore, is to say, look, if you want my money, and if you want me to carry on buying food from you, then stop doing things, particularly in your supply chain, that are environmentally destructive and socially irresponsible, and hold them to account. And if enough of us do that, they will change their policies. And indeed, that is the very power that my organization has leveraged around the world to bring about changes, particularly from retailers, with regard to how they source their food and how they sell it.
So I know that you said you had just returned from the to the country. So when you're facing these problems, not only in places around Europe but other places, what do you think is the biggest difference between the two?
Between the two of what?
Let's say somewhere in Europe versus somewhere in Africa.
Yeah.
When you're traveling to these different countries, what seems to be the difficulty in trying to help food waste?
Yeah, so in rich countries, we can broadly say that most of the food waste happens pretty much out of some kind of a choice. If people buy more food than they need, they chuck the rest away. Supermarkets fill their shelves with more food that they're going to sell, they chuck a lot of the rest away. Farmers grow food that is perfectly good for human consumption, but out of a choice of their retailers, some of that food is chucked away because it doesn't comply with, policies that have been chosen. So it's deliberate. Even if it's not consciously deliberate, it is nevertheless the result of deliberate choices. In sub-Saharan Africa, where a lot of farmers are growing food in very difficult conditions, they lack the financial resources to invest in the kind of infrastructure and the skills that are needed to preserve food and keep it fresh while it gets to market, we can say that a lot of the waste that happens, particularly at farm level and between farms and markets, is a result of, it's what we call post-harvest losses, and it results from a lack of ability and a lack of capacity and a lack of infrastructure and a lack of finance and know-how to get that food from their farms to the market. So it's a very, very different kind of problem. I'm very pleased to say that as a result of some of the work that we've been doing over the years, this coming week there will be announced at Davos, keep your eye on it if it's an area that you're researching, a very big investment from one of the big philanthropic foundations into tackling that very problem in Africa. And so I think whilst they're two quite distinct problems, they are part of one global situation, which is all this food is being grown. A lot of it is being wasted for various different reasons, but tackling both waste in a place like Africa and waste in rich countries can help solve the same problems: environmental impact of food production and food availability in places that need it most.
So you talk a lot about these rich countries, but then also traveling to these third world countries. And so I'm sure that you've not only had to deal with the problem of food waste, but what else do you see when you travel around the world or to these lower income countries that you would describe as either the biggest problem or something that you've tried to help as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Well, to start with, the thing that has really I think shocked me most in our work in the global south. We have recently done, since I met Paul's team in Kenya back in 2013, we've returned to Kenya 3 times, continuing our investigations into how the European and US supermarkets cause farmers out there to waste their food. So those farmers, they are growing for local markets, but they're also increasingly growing for export markets. And it's our policies, both those cosmetic standards, but also the unreliability of our purchasing. So orders are cancelled at the last minute, and that leaves food that has been grown on the hands of farmers who can't then sell it. This means there is an enormous financial loss, very often to the very people who can least bear that cost. We speak to day labourers who literally tell us they get paid half wages or not at all when an order is cancelled by a European supermarket. This means they cannot feed their children. It means they can't send their kids to school. It means they might lose their homes. These are people really on the very verge of survival, and we cause them loss, serious financial hardship, as a result of policies that are completely unnecessary for the adequate supply of food to our markets. And that level of injustice that goes with food waste is one that we have seen around the world. And indeed, it's two things. It's both, I think, the most shocking element of this, even more shocking than the food actually being wasted, is this injustice, the financial injustice. But it's also, for that very reason, also one of our best opportunities to tackle this problem. And indeed, it is through legislation first passed in the United Kingdom here, and now being discussed across Europe, that we intend to put a stop to some of these practices, saying that actually some buying policies, like cancelling orders at the last minute, they're not just immoral and wasteful, they should be illegal.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Tristram. That's all I have. Next up is Megan Heller.
My pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Tristram. I'm Megan Heller, and I'm a senior.
Hi, Megan.
My first question is, what interests you to do... Hold on. What interest do you have for helping the global environment?
Well, I have been an environmentalist for longer than I can remember. And by that, I mean that I have been conscious of the harm that humans are doing to nature, that we are responsible for the worst impacts on the environment. And a lot of that is through the food that we eat. Of course, we need to eat food, but the way we take up land and use water and other resources to grow our food, that is the single biggest impact we have on the planet. Now, that's not to say that we should stop eating food, but it does mean that when we buy food, when we grow food, we should bear in mind that environmental impact and minimize it as far as we possibly can. If we don't do that, if we don't reduce the environmental impact of our food production, what's going to happen? We're going to chop down the world's remaining forests to grow more and more food. We are going to exhaust the freshwater supplies. We're going to contribute to climate change. We're going to contribute to soil erosion. We're going to do a whole load of things that is not just going to deprive all of those other species that share this planet with us of the ability to survive in future, but even in the long run, potentially to undermine the very resource base that human civilization requires for its own survival. And once you're aware of that process going on, and that it is basically being generated by daily choices that we all make, and that it's at least just about possible that we could, as a civilization, change those practices, that is a motivation enough to put every ounce of energy that we have into waking up the giant, which is the mass citizenship of the world, into bringing about the changes that we need to prevent the worst possible scenario that I just described.
What really inspired you to be an environmentalist? Were you a kid, or when did you know you wanted to be an environmentalist?
Yeah, like I say, really before I can even remember how to articulate it, it does interest me, that question. How did it come about, and when did it come about? I remember when I was 10 years old, I wrote to my local McDonald's store, and I said, I'm not gonna come to your store anymore because your packaging is made in ways that release CFCs. You know what CFCs are?
Not really.
Basically, gas that destroys the ozone layer.
Okay.
And if you destroy the ozone layer, that lets ultraviolet light from the sun hit the earth, and it gives everyone skin cancer and causes climate change. And back in the 80s, when people really woke up to this problem, there was a big initiative out there to try to get rid of CFCs, and they were used in making foam packaging and refrigeration principally, and aerosol cans. And I wrote to my McDonald's saying, I don't want to buy in your store because your packaging is contributing to this enormous global problem. Now, I got a letter back a few months later saying, Dear Tristram, thank you for your letter. We have decided, not just in our own store, but in McDonald's company all over the world, to get rid of CFC packaging. And now, as a 10-year-old, I thought that was because of me. In fact, obviously, there was something being produced at the time called the Montreal Protocol, which is the single biggest global environmental agreement, the most successful environmental story that the world has ever seen. Basically, Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at the time, and Ronald Reagan, the President of America at the time, got together and decided that we needed to stop having CFCs released into the atmosphere, and got every country in the world to sign up to an agreement to eliminate them. And that, this is not an exaggeration, if they hadn't done that, the planet would be totally and utterly screwed right now. I mean, there would be no going back. There would be no ozone layer, and climate change would be vastly further ahead than it currently is. So they made that global agreement. But I, in my little way, I thought I'd had an impact. Mm-hmm. Now, I was obviously under an illusion, but I definitely remain convinced that individuals can make a difference. Mm-hmm. And we need to make a difference, because at the moment we are going in a direction that is not good for us, and it's definitely not good for the rest of the species on the planet.
What are some tips that we can take back to our town here in Pontiac? How can we help by saving waste?
Samantha Merkins, please report to the office.
So I think, you've got to make it easy for people. Mm-hmm. And I spend maybe too much of my time kind of lecturing people about what they should do. What I try to do always, I imagine you guys go to parties quite often, right? Imagine someone coming to your party and walking in and saying, listen here, everyone, this party is immoral, it's damaging, turn off the music, put away the booze, and go home to bed and stop enjoying yourself. What are you going to do? You're going to turn the music up louder, and you're going to ignore that person. Mm-hmm. If the person comes into your room and says, guys, there's an even better, bigger, cooler, funner party with more people having more fun just down the road, you're going to leave that party. Mm-hmm. And I think that our job as environmentalists, our job, whether it's food waste activism or whatever, is to make the party that we're having bigger and better than the one that people are having at the moment, the wasteful one. So I can say, look, make it really simple, make it fun, and people are going to come to your party. Mm-hmm. I point out that the very little things that any individual can do, if they stop wasting food, they're going to save money. They're going to have more money in their pocket, and they can spend it on something that they really do enjoy. No one likes to throw food away, right? Yeah. If we have an environment that is more healthy and more full of nature and the rest of it, that's going to be nicer than a planet that is completely depleted of all of those things. If through, for example, the kinds of event that we put on, Feeding the 5,000 events, or I don't know if you've heard of Disco Soup, but it's like a massive party where we get loads of food that would otherwise be wasted and invite everyone to come and prepare it and make a big meal together. If that's the way you communicate about the solutions to the problem, this is actually fun, it's nutritious and delicious, I think you're going to get more people to join you than just saying, you should do this and you should do that. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. I understand that. That's all I have for you. So thanks for talking to us. Next up is Zach Lee.
How's it going, sir?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
Tell him hold on for a minute.
Oh, can you hold on for a sec?
Good morning. Will you please stand for the pledge?
Hold on. It's a pledge.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, go ahead.
Please stay standing for a moment of silence.
Go ahead. Sorry, Tristan.
All right, back.
What on earth was
Have
that?
a good day.
Tell him we have the Pledge of Allegiance.
We have to pledge allegiance every day before school.
Wow.
Yeah, explain it, because he's probably never seen it.
Well, we do that every day at school, and after that we have a moment of silence to think about whatever. Prayer or anything that's on your mind you can think about.
And how common is that in the States? Is that just your school, or is that every school, or is it or what?
Everywhere in the United States.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think we could get like a pledge to stop wasting food stuck in there one day?
Maybe. Yeah.
Who decides what the pledge says?
What's that? What'd you say?
Who decides what the pledge is?
Well, so the Pledge of Allegiance is to our country. We do that every day in formal meetings and governmental meetings. They say the Pledge of Allegiance. Sometime in the 1950s, they put one nation under God, indivisible. That was a big deal because you brought God and government and religion together. And so it was a big deal. Who says that you have to do that? It's a national law. But not only that, it's interesting. Texas, because they're Texas, of course, they have the pledge to Texas, and then they do the pledge to allegiance. And so it depends. It's an interesting concept. It's an interesting thought. Can we pledge to have food waste stopped? I never thought about that. We've been doing the Pledge of Allegiance since these kids were knee-high to a tadpole. And so, that's something that they've grown up with. And I've said it all along that if you start with preschool or kindergartners and at the very bottom, by the time they get to me, it's common nature. They won't go away from it. So, I think if you were to start the pledge of elimination of food waste, wouldn't it would start at preschool or kindergarten, right?
And let me ask you, I kind of imagine that an institution like that's established in schools across the country, have there been other kind of causes that have tried to kind of latch onto that and say, hey, we should have a pledge about, I don't know, something else?
So I don't know if that's so. The moment of silence came about because people felt that they wanted to have a moment to say prayer and felt that it was against their rights. And because of the way education and government and religion go, they did not want to have open prayer in community schools, but they wanted you to allow yourself to have prayer. And so do I think that other people have done that? I don't think anybody's ever thought of that. Maybe they've thought of it, but they've never tried to go down that road. So I'm not real sure. I really have no idea, but it's a pretty interesting concept, isn't it now?
Well, I'm just, I'm an outsider, and I don't know what the sensitivities around this are. But for example, if we were trying to tackle, school kids and get them on side, and there's this kind of general idea of getting together and collectively expressing your value and intention to do a certain thing, that strikes me as a practice that it's really powerful. It's a way of bringing people together, and it's a word I often use, which is the word companion. Companion means somebody literally that you eat bread with, and being kind of expressive about our companionship with each other, both like in the room, in the country, in the world, and expressing that in the way in which we actually eat and eat together, and are mindful of the way in which we eat having an impact on our companions across the country, hungry people, overfed people, people in Africa, people in, wherever. Like, that strikes me as a kind of a culture that, it could be used to spread all sorts of kind of positive messages. I can see you're not going to get a national law for it, but if you said, let's get some schools trying it out and seeing if the kids are up for it, like, just one day a year or something, say...
I think you'd be successful.
Yeah? That doesn't make you immediately think, get out of here, that's for one thing and one thing only.
No. I think you'd be successful in different schools, maybe not all of them, but again, I think the thing, and I don't mean to take Zach's time because he's sitting there going, man, I just got in the middle of this. So, but I think the place to focus that is by looking at the pre-K or K through 6th grade or 5th grade, depending on where middle school starts, and approach it from that area, because obviously they're very, very ultra sensitive and receptive at that age, and that's something that we do as a class. Is we do a lot of projects focused around grades by having our high school kids mentor the grade schoolers by putting on different programs, whether it be Recycle Relay or Enviro Bingo or whatever. But they're very receptive at that age, and I think it will have a lasting impact, especially, and again, my industry is 12 years. It recycles every 12 years, right? And so the reality is, if you think about starting it at pre-K, if they hear this all the way through 6th grade, by the time they get to me, they're, like I said, they're ninja eco warriors, man.
And what age is pre-K?
3 and 4. And think about this. I'm not. Again, we can talk later about this, but the thing to think about too is we've got a lot of groups out there with the changeover in the United States standards of science that are looking for ways to make a vast impact that have never had the opportunity to do so before, because they're not schooled necessarily in science as much as they are in elementary education. I'm sure you have the same problem over there. I don't know if you remember Wayne Talbot from the UK. He's in Cambridge. Anyhow, he was the guy that worked with Bart and all those guys over at Tunzo. Well, he does the same thing in the UK.
Okay. It would be really interesting to hear your thoughts. We're trying to think of good ways of engaging kids in the US, and particularly those younger kids. We just started a conversation with Sesame Street to see if we can get them on board with the idea of food waste, make it fun as always. But yeah, you've given me some food for thought.
Here's the other thing to think about with Sesame Street. There's a study done by people who of kids who watched Sesame Street and kids who didn't, and which ones were more successful. It's a pretty interesting study. You should look it up. It's crazy.
More successful if you watch Sesame Street.
Yeah. My kids are singing Sesame Street right here in the background, so obviously. So hey, we'll spend some time talking, and we'll come up with something. I'll let Zach continue.
Can I just check with you about timing?
We've got a half hour.
Well, I've got 24 minutes.
Okay, 20.
So just want to make sure all your students get a crack at the whip. How many more students am I speaking to?
We have 5.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah, we'll be good. 5 minutes. Yeah.
I know you were talking about your experience with McDonald's and all that, and how that really opened your eyes to being an environmentalist. But during one of your travels, did you really see the problem of food waste at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Like, which
that's
was the
what I
biggest?
do when I travel.
Like, which was the biggest? I mean,
That's a good question. Do you know that trip where I met Paul in Kenya?
yeah.
I would say, it's become a big part. That was my first time to Kenya to look at the issue of food waste. And that trip has launched a whole area of work in my organization. The area of work where we go and speak to small farmers around the global south who are growing food for us in the US and Europe and are being made to waste food because of the policies of our supermarkets. That area has become for me, the most shocking and arguably the most easily solved area of food waste. It really just requires, and we've now convinced a lot of supermarkets to change their policies in ways that stop these farmers wasting so much good food in countries with millions of hungry people. But yeah, seeing a farmer in Kenya on the edge of Mount Kenya farming 2 acres of land, telling us that their entire crop is just going to stand in the field and rot because the order was cancelled from a UK supermarket. The shame I feel of being part of the market that causes that kind of injustice, that's really, I think, the most shocking. I'm thinking right now of a specific farm I stood on. I'll see if I can bring you up a picture to show you what I'm talking about.
All right.
Standing on this farm, and the lady's explaining to us that she's not even going to bother harvesting any of her crop, and she's gone into debt to grow this crop. She's not going to pay the people that work for her because she's not going to get any income. And just literally a couple of 100 meters away, there's this big fence, and that fence is the fence between her farm and the wilderness. That's where the elephants and the lions are living. And that means that we're growing food and we're using Kenyan land and Kenyan water. This is land and water that could be used to feed hungry Kenyans. And also, it's land that is currently being used more and more to grow food for us. And that land is being taken away from the lions and the elephants. So it's kind of like this massive pile of different issues and impacts of our wasteful policies, and it's all for absolutely no good reason. Now, if you just wait a second, I'll just show you. Here we go. Can you see my screen?
No. Yeah, no.
Oh, why's that? Oh, wait, now you can, I think. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at Zach.
So look at her. She's the woman I'm talking about. She's grown these peas for the European supermarket, and she's showing us that she's not even going to harvest a single one of them. Ironically, we call these peas mange tout, which means eat everything, because you eat the whole pod, the outside, the inside. And the irony is not a single one of these peas are going to be eaten at all. And, these people working in a farm just down the road, they're growing basil for European supermarkets. And as you can see, they're just pulling out the crop. They haven't harvested a single leaf. And these women are being paid less than $2 a day normally, but they're not going to be paid anything on this day because they're just destroying a crop rather than selling it. And that is, for me, the real pinnacle of the food waste story globally. It's got so much wrong with it. And as I said to one of your schoolmates a second ago, I don't know a single person who thinks that that's okay. It means that we are doing things in our food system that the people paying for it, you and me, we don't even agree with.
Wow, that's a really eye-opening story you just told. Like, I didn't even realize that was happening in Africa.
Hey, closer to home, I was in Peru in September, and can you see that? Have I still got the share screen? That's 1,000 tons of oranges, all being wasted because, you know, the supermarkets said that these tiny little blemishes here, which you can hardly see, mean that they don't want to sell them.
Wow.
So, you know, everywhere we go, we see that. You should look out for an article. It's going to come out next month in National Geographic magazine, because National Geographic came with me on this trip to Peru.
Yeah.
So they'll be telling that story.
Wow. Well, this is probably my last question, but is there a single food product that you'd wish wouldn't be wasted, like the biggest food product that is being wasted all over the world?
Well, it's maybe the reverse of what you think, because I often focus on fruit and vegetables, which are the thing that are wasted in the largest quantity. But if I could choose one thing we stop wasting, it would be meat. Because meat, although it represents a much smaller volume of waste, the resources that go into growing meat are much, much greater than the resources that grow into vegetables. So if I could encourage people to stop wasting meat, that's what I would do. And if you look at where meat is being wasted, just look at the portion sizes being offered in restaurants and buffets and diners up and down your own country. I mean, we are being served more food than is good for our own health. It's costing us money, and it's costing the environment. And if I could do one thing, I would just halve the meat portion sizes on the plates of US citizens around the world. That's going to be a very, very tricky thing to achieve. But yeah, if I had a magic wand, that's where I'd go.
This is a very eye-opening experience, and I want to thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand it off to Jacob Giles.
Thank you.
Hello. I have to start out by asking, where exactly are you? Like sitting
it's a good
right
question. I have a meeting right after this with a PR company called Freud's, who are based here in London, but they also have a big office in the US, and they represent some of the worst companies in the world, like Mars and, you know, Coca-Cola and that kind of thing. But they have offered to do some work for us for free. And in fact, just this week, we're launching my latest project, which is to make beer out of bread waste. And so we'll be launching that as a way of communicating about the huge scale of bread waste. So I got a meeting here about the launch of that new initiative of ours, and so I'm in their offices.
Well, that's interesting. I just wanted to start off with this first question. How does your work with global food waste connect with the growing issue of water conservation and water use around the world?
Massively. Agriculture, as you probably know, is the single biggest use of fresh water around the world by a very, very long way. And you are in the United States, which is undergoing a chronic water shortage problem in your areas of agricultural production, in particular, as you know, California, which frankly is running out of water, and most of that water is being used for agriculture.
Yep.
Now, if at the same time you're wasting a third of the agricultural production that water is going to produce, what do you want to do if you want to save water? Yeah, you want to have shorter showers, you want to turn off your tap when you're doing your teeth. All of those things you need to do, but the one thing you can do to save water on a much bigger scale is stop wasting so much damn food. And that's an easy thing for everyone to do, and would, you know, really, really help. That's the really crazy message. And I will tell you that in our kind of strategic thinking about how to campaign in the USA, the environmental message that I'm used to carrying about deforestation and species extinction and, climate change, those are difficult messages to carry in the US because actually most people are not yet on that journey. But talking about water, that's something people will understand.
Yeah, I feel like, and it's much more apparent to view though, because when you look over like in Arizona at all the lakes, and you can just see where the water level used to be, and then it's 12 feet below that just over a span of maybe 5 years.
Yeah, and I could show you, if you showed me that picture of an empty lake, the difference between what it used to be and what it is now, I could put like a line and say this much of that loss can be attributed to food that was grown and never eaten. Thanks, I'm going to do that.
And
in fact, can I ask you to do it?
We could.
Would you like
yes.
to do like a school assignment?
Tell them
where
we'll get on it.
Get a photograph of that lake, show the line between where it is and where it was, work out how much of that can be attributed to agriculture. It's something like 70% of water use or something. And then how much of agriculture was just wasted, like a third of it. And then just draw me that line and say, this is the amount that was water that was used to grow food that got chucked away.
Yep, I'm sure we'll be able to get that to you at some point, maybe even this week.
Yeah, tell them we're on it.
Yeah, Mr. Ritter's yelling at me to say we're getting on it.
Right.
And then you touched on it a little bit, but just how does the social and cultural aspect of portion sizes in countries differ from how the food waste is measured?
Yeah.
Because I know that must play a massive toll on.
That is so true. And it's when we come to the USA, that portion size issue it's really our biggest problem. It's the biggest problem. In the US, you have in your shops and restaurants twice as much food as is actually needed by the nutritional needs of your population. Twice as much food, and a lot of that is ending up on plates in portion sizes that are bigger than you can eat, even if you eat more than you should for your own health. Now, how do we come in as Brits to a country and say, guys, this is really dumb. You're wasting money. You're not doing yourself any favors. Just reduce portion sizes. To a country that is used to thinking of big portions as good value, as generosity, as hospitality, as being well looked after and being given everything that you might need. What I said to, I think it was Megan, about needing to have your party bigger and better than everyone else's party, that's a very difficult message to carry. And I'll be honest with you, we haven't come up with the answer to that question. So if you've got any bright ideas about how to tackle portion sizes in a way that will work in the USA, I want to hear about it.
Well, personally, I would probably do with elementary and start with children and just educate the say portion size, and then because at that age they don't yet understand, they're already young and they're just learning everything. So if you imprint it in them at that age that they don't actually need as much as what they're being given, and then that would probably stick along with them.
Do you know, I think that's a brilliant idea, and I'm going to flip it round. I am pretty convinced that a young child from anywhere up to say 6 or something like that, they don't need to be taught not to expect gigantic portion sizes. They've still got their basic animal instincts intact. They haven't been subjected yet to the mass marketing of the food industry that wants them to buy more food because that's a profit margin for the company. They're going to have their instincts there. And I think that you could probably prove that a child of a certain age doesn't expect massive portion sizes and doesn't overeat. In fact, I know that's been proven that young children will not overeat. But unless, they're really like encouraged to eat calorie dense food, but basically they'll eat a good diet. And that's more like not me educating the kids, but the kids should be educating us older generation who have been, I speak for myself here, corrupted by the marketing power of the food industry, and to really use those kids as a way of telling the truth, which is that it's not natural for us to expect so much food, let alone throw so much of it away.
And I'm sure some other people will agree with me on this, but nothing is more nothing sticks with you more than your children just telling you what to do.
Yeah.
It's
Big time.
So if you go home from school and then you tell your parents about it, and then your parents actually start to hear it every day when you talk about it, so then that's another way of just spreading it.
I'm right on. The nag effect, I've been involved in other projects that have been about getting kids to switch off the lights and switch off computers. And getting kids to do it at school has an enormous impact on energy use in the school. But then they go home and they do it. Bang, you've multiplied your impact by many times. Can you just remind me your name, young sir?
Jacob Giles.
Jacob, I want to remain in contact with you. You are absolutely right on in your thinking. And, you've been through the education system that I am very interested in finding out a bit more about. And I would like to hear more of your ideas on this issue.
Yeah, I'd love to talk back with you as well.
I'm serious.
Mr. Ritter, should I keep gas or someone else?
You can do another one. We've got a couple minutes.
Okay. Let me just look through here.
Actually, you know what? You better let these guys go.
Yeah.
Tell them we'll
Jacob,
talk.
I want to speak to you again anyway. So just be in touch with me. You email me through Mr. Ritter.
Yeah, Mr. Ritter will let me have all of your information. Thank you for talking to me. Connor, someone? Okay, Connor's going to be coming up to talk to you now.
Thank you, Jacob.
Hi.
Hi, Connor.
How you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. So it's a very interesting conversation for me.
Well, it's an honor to talk to you. So, I have a question for you. So, it's obvious that some societies have become single-use, with paper plates and solo cups and stuff like that. Do you think that food waste is related to that whole single-use ideal?
Yeah, definitely. It all relates to this massive state of abundance that we in rich countries currently live in. And it goes back really thousands and thousands of years, even millions of years. Really what we humans have been trying to do all of these years is to create a surplus, to have more available to us than we absolutely need. Because for most of our past, that has meant we have an insurance policy, a buffer between us and starvation, us and survival. So we have gone out to get more and more stuff just to guarantee our survival. That has now gone way out of control. We now have the power and the economic resources to create such an enormous amount beyond what we need, that not only is it creating its own problems for us, like overconsumption, like pollution, like you've seen the problem of plastics in the ocean, but it's causing the environmental problems that are really going to bite us back in the ass. And that, in a way, you can understand how we've got to where we've got to. You can understand the motives behind the system that has created that surplus. But we are now suffering from we're really victims of our own success in that way. And it plays out in the food that we produce and that we throw away, in the plastic we produce and throw away, in the computers that we produce, use for 2 years, and then throw away. It's all the same thing.
So do you think then that there's any solution to the problem besides changing the entire nation's ideals?
No, I think we have to change the entire nation's ideals.
Alrighty.
I really, really do. And in a way, of course, there are loads of other potential ways of bringing about change, technology and, environmental efficiency and all of these things. But at root, we need to have a society that cares about these issues. And if we don't have that, we're not going to make the choices we need to make. We're not going to elect the governments that are required to bring in the legislation. We're going to carry on accelerating in the same direction that we're accelerating at the moment. And that, I'm sorry to say to you, I think is probably the way we're going to go. But I think we have just a little bit of hope that we can change the entire values of our nation and indeed world civilization. We can do that just about in time. If we all put all of our effort into bringing that about, we can maybe do it. And that's what we got to do. That's what we got to try and do.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Seth now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tristram.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good.
So, I have a question for you. So, I'm with a lot of ag classes here at the high school, and a big thing an agriculture classes.
Yeah, cool.
So, one of our big topics, we've been talking about, like, feeding, like, the growing population and stuff. So, a big topic that comes up is GMOs, and I want to know your viewpoint on GMOs and introducing them into, like, third world countries and Africa and stuff like that.
Well, the first thing I want to tackle before I answer GMOs specifically is I kind of imagine that the framework that you have been given to work within is the following. The following is that there are 9 billion people expected on the planet by 2050, that this means we have to massively increase food production by 50, 60, 70, some people say even 100% to feed that growing population, and that we need to do that by producing more food on our farms. Am I right that that is the basic premise that you have to work within?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and that is total and utter nonsense. And it is not just nonsense, it is indeed the very thing that will, in my view, undermine the ability of this planet to provide enough food for future generations. Because the way in which we are going to generate more food is maybe a little bit with increased yields in GMOs, maybe even dramatic increases in yields from GMOs and other agricultural technologies, but we have no real reason to believe that those technologies are going to deliver the increase in yields that would be required to double the food production of the planet by 2050, or even increase it by 10 or 15%. The way in which we're going to increase food production is by increasing the amount of land that we use to grow food. That is what is happening right now, and it's happening more and more and faster all around the world. And what that's doing is removing the world's forests and other wild places and contributing to climate change and interruption of hydrological cycles. And it is that process that really risks the ability of this planet to grow enough food. We already grow enough food to feed 9 billion people. We waste a third of it, and we thrust a whole ton more, 40% of our agricultural output, down the throats of animals that inefficiently turn that food into meat and dairy products. And if we want to feed the world in 2050, then it is reducing waste and reducing excessive meat and dairy consumption that we need to attend to first and foremost. So that piece of my rant is over. In terms of GMOs, I differ from most of my environmentalist peers because I think it is really foolish of environmentalists to say that GMOs are, by all accounts, totally wrong. I think that's what we would call throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yep. This is a technology, an extremely powerful technology in its nascency, and it has the potential to provide crops that can reduce water consumption, increase yields, reduce other agricultural impacts, avoid pests, get rid of a whole load of problems that we currently encounter on farms, and do it in ways that don't necessarily kill the planet. Most of the crops currently available on the market and being produced around the world do not do any of those things. The really big ones, Roundup Ready soy and the maize plants, they're not increasing yields. They are pretty much, not exclusively, but a lot of it is about providing a market for a number of very, very powerful companies. So the problem is, how do you get the good out of GMO without getting the bad? And that requires proper legislation. And it also requires an investment in genetic engineering from independent state-funded research organizations that are going to be looking for crops that serve the interests of humanity rather than ones that serve the interests of the capital, the companies that are currently generating most of those GM crops.
Yeah. Am I going?
Go.
I'm going?
No, Molly.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering my question. I'm going to turn over to Molly. I'm sure she has a quick
I hope
question.
it was helpful.
Yep, it was. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Molly.
Hi, Molly. How you doing?
Good. How about you?
Pretty good.
I was wondering if you had time to answer one more question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I was wondering if you could share to us about some of the current projects you're working on.
Well, I mentioned the very exciting fact that we will be launching Feeding the 5,000 and other of our campaigns across the USA this year. That's very exciting for us. It's going to kick off with some Feeding the 5,000 events in DC and New York City, but hopefully we'll be coming to Illinois. We'll be going around the country, and we're looking for organizations who want to work with us to really kick off the grassroots, citizen-led campaign against food waste in the USA. We're getting a lot of mileage, but that for me is a big preoccupying part of it. The other thing that we'll be doing a lot of is what we call our overseas supply chain research, where we're going into the overseas supply chains of our markets in the US and the EU and looking for the policies that are causing waste in those countries. So that's going to be ongoing work. And then there's a very exciting project, which at the moment is a very small one, but it could become big for us. And I mentioned it a second ago. And that is that we are producing beer using unsold bread that would otherwise be wasted. And it's a really good quality beer. And like I mentioned, it's a celebratory solution to a colossal problem, one that helps to communicate. And hopefully, if it goes well, we'll actually produce revenues for our charity. All the profits will go straight into the charity. So that's something that is, pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. You've heard of Jamie Oliver, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a TV program here in the UK, and it's going out on Friday. And our waste bread beer is going to be in that. So hopefully it will create a lot of noise.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with me in our class. I'm going to turn it back over to Coach Ritter.
Okay.
Okay, I know you got to go, and I appreciate everything, and I can't say thank you enough for the time that you gave us. I'll get you what? Oh, we got to take a picture with you, a big selfie. So all you got to do is smile, but which you do pretty good. So, but I'll get your email. I don't have your email. I have Louisa's email, but I'll get it from you, or I'll get it from her, and
Cool.
we'll be in contact. And like I said, we'd love to have you here. So hold on just a second. Everybody together. Everybody together. One, two, smile, Tristan. One more. One more. One, two. Got it. Okay. So, hey, the kids will probably also want to send you. The kids will probably also want to send you a T-shirt. So I'll need to get your shirt size and your address, and you and I can talk later, and I'll get your email, and we'll go from there. So this is 20 Questions with Tristram Stuart. You're a hero of ours. You did a great job. Rock and roll, man. It's so awesome, and we'll be in contact, and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much. Really, really interesting for me.
So, and we'll get you all the stuff that you need, and we'll go from there. All right. Have a great day. Good luck with your meeting.
Bye-bye.
Wow.
He stayed extra. You just